So I enrolled in Medicare at 65 the way most men do. The mail started arriving maybe 6 months before my birthday. Red, white, and blue envelopes, government seals, language that made missing this deadline sound catastrophic. So I enrolled. And I don't regret it. My situation at the time made it the right call. But here's what I didn't know when I did it. And what I wish someone had told me clearly before I made that decision without examining it. There are men who should not enroll in Medicare at 65. Men in specific situations where enrolling costs them real money they didn't need to spend, and in some cases costs them access to one of the most tax-efficient savings vehicles in the entire American tax code. And there are also men who think they're protected from Medicare penalties by alternative coverage, a COBRA plan, an ACA marketplace plan, a retiree health plan, who delay past 65 assuming they are covered and end up with a permanent penalty attached to their Medicare premium for the rest of their lives. Both groups needed different information than what the government mailers provide, and most of them made the decision without it. So, what I want to do today is give you what the envelopes don't. Who should legitimately delay and why? What coverage actually protects you and what just looks like it does? The traps that catch men who thought they were making the smart move, and the penalty structure because it's permanent and it compounds, and every man approaching 65 deserves to understand exactly what he's risking. By the way, my name is Edward Gray, and I'm a retiree just like you. On this channel, I share what I've learned from my own retirement, my own mistakes, and the conversations I've had along the way, so you can see where you stand and what you might do differently. If that sounds like something you want more of, hit subscribe and become part of this community. And while you're down there, drop a comment. Did you enroll in Medicare automatically at 65, or did you make a deliberate decision about it? Tell me which one. Now, if you're already working and covering yourself or a spouse through a solid employer plan, and you're approaching 65, stay with this. Because the first thing I want you to hear is the piece that genuinely bothered me when I finally understood it clearly. It has to do with an account you may already have. You're 64, still working, still covered by your employer's health plan, and you've been funding a health savings account for years, contributing the maximum, building a tax-free reserve for medical expenses in retirement. For 2026, an individual over 55 can contribute $5,400 to an HSA, the $4,400 base limit plus a $1,000 catch-up contribution. Every dollar goes in pre-tax. Every dollar grows tax-free. Every dollar comes out tax-free when used for qualified medical expenses. It's the only triple tax-free account in the entire American tax code. And the moment you enroll in any part of Medicare, including Part A, which is free, you lose the ability to contribute to it. Both you and your employer must stop all contributions immediately. So, a man who enrolls in Medicare Part A at 65 because it's free, and everyone said to while he's still working and covered by a solid employer plan, just gave up $5,400 a year in triple tax-free savings every year until he fully retires, without knowing that's what he was doing. Over 3 more years of working, that's $16,200 in HSA contributions he can no longer make. At the triple tax advantage of the HSA, the pre-tax contribution, the tax-free growth, the tax-free withdrawal, the real cost to his retirement is significantly higher than the contribution amount alone. Now here's where it gets more alarming. There's a 6-month retroactive enrollment trap that catches men who apply for Social Security late. When you apply for Social Security benefits at 65 or older, Medicare Part A is automatically enrolled and retroactively for up to 6 months before your application date. So a man who turns 65, keeps working, delays Medicare deliberately because he's protecting his HSA, and applies for Social Security at 65 and a half. Medicare Part A retroactively enrolls him back to age 65. And any HSA contributions he made during those 6 months he thought he was protected become excess contributions. They trigger a 6% annual penalty on the excess amount until he removes them and refile paperwork to correct the return. He didn't know he'd been retroactively enrolled. He thought he was fine. The penalty arrived anyway. If you're delaying Medicare to protect HSA contributions, two things need to happen simultaneously. Delay Social Security as well, because applying for Social Security triggers automatic Medicare Part A enrollment and the 6-month look-back. And stop HSA contributions at least 6 months before you plan to apply for either. The HSA and the Medicare enrollment date have to be planned together. Treating them as separate decisions is how men accidentally create excess contribution problems that take a year to unwind. And that brings me to the men who actually have the clearest case for delaying. Because this protection is real, and most men who have it don't know they have it. If you are actively working and covered by a group health insurance plan through an employer with 20 or more employees, you do not have to take Medicare at 65. You can delay enrollment without any penalty. The employer group plan protects you. Same if you're not working, but your spouse is actively working and you're covered by their employer's group plan. Again, 20 or more employees. You're protected. When you eventually retire or lose that employer coverage, you have a special enrollment period. 8 months from the date coverage ends to enroll in Medicare without penalty. You don't have to scramble, you have 8 months. Now, why would you actually delay if you have this protection? The HSA we just covered is the biggest reason. Every year you legitimately delay is another year of triple tax-free savings building. Beyond that, your employer plan might genuinely be better than Medicare for your situation. About half the time, when men actually compare the two, the employer plan wins. Better network, lower out-of-pocket, lower cost when the employer is covering a large share of the premium. And if you're the working spouse whose employer covers your full premium, but much less of your spouse's, there's sometimes a case for having the non-working spouse move to Medicare while you stay on the group plan, collecting the full employer subsidy. None of these are reasons to delay recklessly. They're reasons to examine the decision deliberately rather than responding to the mail on autopilot. But here's where it gets more serious. And this specific part catches men who think they're protected when they're not. Everything about legitimate delay assumes your employer has 20 or more employees. For large employers, the group health plan pays first. If a medical bill comes in, the employer plan covers its portion, and Medicare, if you have it, covers its share after. The system works the way you'd expect. For employers with fewer than 20 employees, the order flips. Medicare becomes the primary payer the moment you're eligible for it. And here's what that means in practice. If you're 65, eligible for Medicare, and you don't have Medicare, the insurance company covering your employer's small group plan can see that. They can see you're Medicare eligible and that Medicare didn't pay first. And they're legally entitled to refuse to pay your claim until Medicare pays first. Since you don't have Medicare, Medicare isn't paying first, which means the insurance company that covers your employer plan can deny the claim entirely. You thought you were covered. You had an insurance card in your wallet, The plan exists, but because you're Medicare eligible and didn't enroll, the plan's insurance company can legally treat your claims as if you have no coverage at all. And here's what makes this worse. Some insurance companies in this situation still pay anyway. They choose not to enforce the rule. Others refuse. There's no way to know which you have until a claim gets denied. And the man who finds out his claims are being refused is usually finding out from a hospital billing department while he's in the middle of a health event. If you work for a company with fewer than 20 employees and you're approaching 65, find out specifically how your employer's insurance company handles this before you make any decision about Medicare. In most cases, the answer is to enroll, because the protection that larger employer plans provide simply doesn't exist here. And that brings me to something that trips up men who did know they needed to make a deliberate decision. They just made the wrong assumption about what was protecting them. The most common version of this is COBRA. So you left your job. Retired early, layoff, whatever the reason. You're on COBRA, continuing your employer's coverage at your own expense. And then you turn 65. Most men in this situation assume COBRA protects them from Medicare penalties the same way active employer coverage would. It doesn't. And this is the part that most men only find out from a penalty notice, not from the HR team when they left. When you're 65 or older, COBRA simply doesn't count as qualifying employer coverage for Medicare purposes. The penalty clock starts at 65 regardless. Every month past 65 without qualifying coverage adds to a permanent penalty you'll carry for the rest of your life. 2 years on COBRA past 65 without enrolling adds a 20% surcharge to your Part B premium, $40.58 more per month at 2026 rates, permanently, growing every year as the base premium rises. The man who spent 2 years on COBRA assuming he was protected ends up carrying a higher Medicare premium for the rest of his retirement from a misunderstanding, not from recklessness. There's no appeal for this situation. Once the window closes, it's closed. And the same trap hits men in a completely different situation, retired early or self-employed. For the same reason, but with an additional financial hit on top of the penalty. ACA marketplace plans are real insurance with real premiums and real coverage. What they aren't is qualifying coverage for Medicare penalty purposes. Stay on one past 65 without enrolling in Medicare, and the penalty clock runs exactly as if you had nothing at all. And there's the financial hit on top of that. A CA subsidies disappear at Medicare eligibility. The marketplace plan that was affordable with the subsidy becomes significantly more expensive at 65. Often more expensive than Medicare itself. So a man who stays on the ACA plan at 65 is simultaneously paying more for coverage that isn't protecting him from penalties. Both problems hit at once. If you're on an ACA plan approaching 65, the math almost always points the same direction. Enroll in Medicare. And here's the one that catches men who actually did everything right, confirmed the employer qualifies, delayed correctly, and still ended up with a penalty they didn't see coming. It's a drug coverage issue, and most HR departments never mention it unprompted. You're still working at 65. Large employer. 20-plus employees. You legitimately delay Medicare Part B because you're protected by the employer plan. But your employer plan's prescription drug coverage may not be considered creditable by Medicare's standards. And if it's not creditable, the Part D penalty clock is running, even though the Part B clock isn't. Creditable drug coverage means coverage that's expected to pay at least as much as Medicare's standard drug benefit on average. Many employer plans meet this standard, some don't. And there's no automatic way to know which yours is without asking HR, specifically whether the plan's drug coverage is creditable for Medicare. Part D purposes. The man who delays Medicare correctly because he has a qualifying large employer plan, but whose drug coverage turns out to not be creditable, can emerge from years of valid delay with no Part B penalty and a significant Part D penalty he didn't know he was accumulating. Ask HR one direct question before you delay anything. Is our prescription drug coverage certified as creditable for Medicare Part D? The answer determines whether your legitimate delay protects you fully or whether the Part D penalty clock is already running, even as the Part B clock isn't. So let me tell you what the penalties actually look like. Because saying they're permanent doesn't land the same way as seeing the numbers. The Part B penalty is 10% of the standard monthly premium for each 12-month period you delayed without qualifying coverage. In 2026, the standard Part B premium is $202.90. Delay 2 years and you are paying $40.58 more per month. Delay 3 years, $60.87 more per month. And because that 20% is applied to whatever the base premium is in any given year, as that base premium rises annually, your penalty dollar amount rises with it. A permanent percentage of a permanently increasing number. The Part D penalty runs 1% of the national base beneficiary premium of $38.99. For every month you went without creditable drug coverage. Delay 24 months and you're paying roughly $9.36 more per month on your drug coverage. Also permanent, also rising. These don't expire. A man who earned them through a 2-year COBRA misunderstanding pays them every month until he dies. And they're entirely avoidable. Every man carrying one was carrying it because he didn't have the right information when the window was open. And when I step back from all of this, what I wish I'd had at 65 is one honest question to anchor the whole decision. Am I actively covered by a group health plan from an employer with 20 or more employees, either mine or my spouse's? If yes, you have real protection. Examine it, run the comparison, factor in the HSA if you're still contributing, and make the decision deliberately. If no, enroll, because COBRA won't protect you. An ACA plan won't protect you. A retiree health plan won't protect you. And any of those past 65 without Medicare is accumulating a permanent penalty with a window that doesn't reopen. And one more thing before I close. If you're planning to delay Medicare to protect HSA contributions, delay Social Security at the same time. Applying for Social Security triggers automatic Medicare. Part A enrollment retroactively for up to 6 months. The two decisions are connected. Plan them together. I enrolled at 65 automatically. Right call for where I was, but I made it on autopilot, not from understanding, and autopilot works until it doesn't. The men who make this decision deliberately, who know the employer plan question, the HSA connection, the COBRA and ACA traps, and what the penalty looks like when it's permanent and growing. Those men arrive at the same decision or a different one, but they arrive there knowing what they chose and why. That's the version worth having. Drop a comment and tell me, did you know COBRA didn't protect you from Medicare penalties? Or that Part A enrollment stops HSA contributions immediately? Because I'd guess most men didn't. And most men didn't find out until they were already past the window where knowing it mattered. And if today gave you something useful, share this with someone approaching 65 who's planning to just respond to the government mail without examining the decision. Because that mail tells you when to enroll. It doesn't tell you when not to. And if you're not already part of this community, come join us. Because this is what we do here. Real retirement decisions, real financial consequences from guys who are actually living it. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. See you in the next one.